Hey, it's Ted McGrath. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how to create the greatest speech ever. And the way I learned to do that was by breaking into complete sweats on stage and almost passing out in front of an audience when I was 22 years old. So you might be wondering what the biggest mistake in my speaking career has to do with the greatest speech ever. And whether you're brand new and you're just getting started and you've never spoken on stage, or you're looking to get better and better on stage, I'm going to share with you some basic principles that makes it a lot easier to speak. So first and foremost, the best speeches come in person and from the stage. So get yourself in front of a live audience in person. But I'm going to bust a few myths here that exist in the world of public speaking so that you can confidently go out there with a framework and a mindset to go out and speak and not worry about it. I've coached everybody from people who are 24 years old with a stutter, how to get up and speak and deliver wonderful seminars over the course of 2 days. I've taught pastors how to take their lifelong experience of speaking from the stage and turn it into a business model and then monetize and become a paid speaker. I've performed my own one-man show where I play 12 different characters from the stage and do a 65-minute story on my life. And there's 3 principles that I've learned in storytelling that I want to teach you today that make a good or a great speech. Number 1 is storytelling. So I'm going to cover what storytelling is today, how to be really effective at it, and how do you tell a great story. Okay. Number 2 is risks. You have to take risks in public speaking. The way you get great at it is confronting bigger and bigger audiences and more uncomfortable situations. So I'll talk about how I've done that all throughout my career, and I've helped many people do this. And then the third thing is the message. So every great speech has to have some message in it that the audience can take away. Every great story has some message that's embedded in it, and whether the audience knows it or not, they're getting the message. So those are the 3 pillars of what I want to talk about today. And I think you can let yourself kind of relax a little bit, because I think there's an over hype that has to do with, how you use your hands or how you stand, or if you trip up on your words. And those things are not the senior things in public speaking. Okay. The senior things for me, and the way that I've taught it to others, is when you tell a great story, one of the things that happens is you get into present time and you get into the present moment and you get lost in the story. So storytelling is very different than data or event telling. Data would be like, hey, I'm going to teach you these 3 things today, and then I teach you about them. Well, when you teach people stuff, you only have their attention for so long. And so people kind of just blur out after a while. So the key to good speaking is teach something, tell a story. Teach something, tell a story. Or just keep telling stories and then teach something. Keep telling stories and then teach something, right? So it's one of the great components that gets people comfortable, because storytelling can put you and the audience in present time. So they're not just sitting there receiving information and then phasing out, receiving information and then phasing out. They're actually in the story. They're in the moment. So I want to share with you 3 components of storytelling, and I'll share with you the brief story of how I had the worst speech ever that became the best. Okay. So storytelling has an arc. Number 1, it's there's a pit moment in storytelling. There's a moment where you have loss and you're facing the dragon and you're down in the pit and you wonder how you're ever going to get out of this thing. Okay. So it's a conflict for the hero of the story, right? And then from there, when you're down in the pit, you go for a search to get out of the pit, to eventually have some type of breakthrough or some moment at the end. All right. So when you're speaking from the stage, you want to have a pit moment followed by a search, and then a breakthrough. Okay. So when I first started speaking, my boss, I remember, was like, who wants to public speak? And I was like 21 at the time. I was like, I'll do it. Right. And I was too dumb and green to know that it was kind of a crazy idea, considering I didn't know anything at 21 years old. And so I went out and I did my first seminar. I remember my first seminar that I ever did was like 40 people in the room. And I just paced back and forth, telling stories. And the only thing that got me through it was the ability to actually tell a story. but I could not confront the audience. So when you're speaking, particularly when you're selling, okay, you have to be able to confront the audience and be there with the audience. And I just walked back and forth, back and forth. It was an amazement that I even picked up one client. So then I did a couple talks after that. I remember on my third or fourth talk ever, when I was about 22, I got an opportunity to go speak in front of a group of certified public accountants, like 10 of them. And so I had been out that weekend, and I was, drinking at the time and partying at the time. And I walked in on a Monday morning, just really confident, because I was like, I've rehearsed this speech 15 times. I could do it in my sleep, like no problem, right? And I'd memorized the speech word for word for word. And so I walked in and I get up on stage and I start delivering my talk. And like 2 minutes in, I go blank. I mean, like sheet white blank. Like I can't even remember my name blank. And then the harder I try to remember, the worse it gets and the blacker it gets. And then 2 beads of sweat start coming down my forehead. And then all of a sudden it starts dripping down my shirt. And I've got this light blue shirt on with no undershirt. And I've got this navy blue jacket. And I take off my jacket because I'm really hot. And there's beads of sweat just coming down my shirt. And within minutes, my entire shirt is waterlogged, soaked with sweat. So I do anything as any intelligent speaker would do. I literally went and sat down in the front row with the CPAs, and we're literally watching nobody on the freaking stage. And I remember just sitting there, and vaguely I could feel what was going on in the room. And I felt my boss just looking at me like, what the hell is going on? And it felt like an eternity. And after about 60 seconds, 90 seconds, I decided I'm going to get back up there on that stage. And I walked up there and I finished the talk, and I delivered the worst talk ever, period, in the history of public speaking. And I remember riding home with my boss, right? And I didn't say a word the entire time. I just pretended I was sick, right? I was probably sick in the head just getting up there to go speak after a weekend of partying. And like for days, I couldn't confront anybody. I couldn't talk to anybody. I'm like, I'm never going to speak again. My career's over. That was the worst idea. And sure enough, a few days later, I walk back in his office and I'm like, dude, 2 months from now, I'm setting the date. I said, we're going to do a big seminar. And I said, get at least one person from that CPA group back to that talk that I'm going to give, right? And of course, I could only get one because nobody would ever want to show up and see me speak again. So he had to beg this person to come to this event. And sure enough, 2 months later, I show up. I nail the talk. Best speech I've ever given. Of course, it was only my 4th or 5th. And I developed the confidence again to public speak. All right. So the lesson here is very simple. One, tell stories when you're talking, because story just gets you into comfort, and have some humor in your stories. It's okay to be vulnerable on the stage. It's okay to make fun of yourself on the stage. It's okay to tell a story that's personal on the stage. The more personal it is, my coach used to tell me this, the more personal it is, the more universal it becomes. So the more personal it is, the more people it reaches, right? So it's very, very powerful concept. And so I learned over the years that storytelling just brought the energy up in the room. So when you're going to go give a talk, you should tell a story, and then you should teach a principle. So for you and your storytelling, if you're going to craft your talk and you're going to do any speech on stage, before you even do the talk, figure out a story you want to tell. Like, what is a pit moment in your life that you had? How did you search, right, to get out of the pit and find the answers? And then what was the breakthrough moment where you redeemed yourself, or something good happened, or you got some result? And as a public speaker, people are going to expect you to give some lesson about your life, right? So ultimately, at the end, there has to be some stat or some breakthrough or something you learned that turned into good or benefited you, or a lesson you took from bad and turned it into something good. So it goes pit, search, breakthrough moment, and then some lesson that you can pass on to the audience. So number one is story. Number two, you gotta take risks. Okay. Um, you know, when I first saw a guy by the name of Bo Eason do a one-man show, I'll never forget it. It was a business seminar, and I almost didn't go to the business seminar. And I showed up, and we're watching this marketing that's going on in the seminar, and all of a sudden, this dude comes out on stage in his football uniform. And he just starts going into different characters and telling us the story and talking about when he was 9 years old. And I'm just watching this thing I'm totally mesmerized. Like, how is this guy doing this? He had my attention the entire freaking time. And by the end of the story, we're laughing, you're determined, you're almost crying. By the end of the story, standing ovation, the entire room stands up, and I turn to my friend next to me, and I'm like, that's going to be me. I'm going to do that. And I went on the journey to do a one-man show, and I saw it and observed it, and then I attempted to go do it. And when I attempted to go do it, because I lead seminars, I do seminars every 2 months now, and I do a 3-day seminar, and typically it's either 3 or 4 days, and I lead from in front of the room, and I normally do the whole thing, and now I do it with my business partner, but leading for 3 days and speaking for 3 days is a lot. But I'm like, on top of doing a 4-day seminar, I am going to do a one-man show. And I got up on stage for my first one-man show, and I did it, and I started reenacting these incidents, and I started playing these characters, and it was like a dead fish flopping on stage, gasping for air for its life. That's how bad it was. And I remember getting off stage, and my buddy's like, so what did you think? I'm like, dude, I don't even know. That was a nightmare, but at least I got up there and did it. And the key to risk taking is confronting that thing that you want to go do. Okay. So don't think that public speaking for everybody's just, oh, it's just natural. You just get up on stage and you do it. Most people have fear. Most people have energy coming through them. You can label it and be like, I'm afraid, or you can just allow the energy for the moment to come out. And one of my beliefs on this, where I've transcended the fear piece to a piece where it's really actually just energy, and you use that energy, and it's your own energy you use to create an effect in the room, is when I was speaking on Deepak Chopra's stage with Donna Karan and Deepak, and I had to get up in front of 600 people, and it was a fundraiser. And I'll never forget, like, as I was getting up, like, my leg was like tweaking, man, tweaking. And I was trying to contain the energy of what I was feeling. And the whole idea with public speaking is you're supposed to give the energy. You don't contain the energy. So I learned a really great lesson there. When you get up on stage, you just let it rip, man. And if you're feeling anything before you get on stage, it's because your anchor points are in, meaning your attention's in. Your attention needs to be out. And your attention needs to fill the room. And if there's 600 people, you need to hit the person in the back of the room. And if you can get there ahead of time and just walk the room and just put your anchor points all over the room and walk the room and feel what it's like to be in the back and see from the point of the view of the audience in the back, and then go to the front of the stage and go to the corner of the room and go to the side of the room. There's nothing worse than getting up on a stage when it feels unfamiliar. And even the feeling of the ground on the stage can be shakier if you have one of those things that, I don't know if they call them, they're not podiums, but whatever they're called, where you stand up on them. And it's like, wow, it's like sometimes they're a little bit loose, and you're just like, man, and my feet don't feel stable. So I always make sure that I get up there. How does it feel to walk? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel in my body? And those things are super important when you're getting on stage and to have your attention out. Okay. So when you do that, you're more willing to confront the audience because your space and your attention's out, and you're already putting your attention out. So you're already permeating the room, and you're confronting the audience rather than just confronting 2 inches in front of your face. And there's nothing that will be a worse talk ever, period, ever, than if you're just talking to yourself. Okay. You have to know and understand that when you're giving a communication, you have to hit the person in the front row, the back row, the back row, the back row, the back row. The communication has to go somewhere. And most people, when they talk, like my first talk, when I was walking back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, I wasn't communicating to the audience. I was communicating in my head. And you can't win when you're communicating in your head. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So communication has to go there, and they have to receive it. And you'll know they're receiving it when they light up and they're like laughing and they're in communication with you. The other thing to get rid of stage fright, if you want to walk on stage, there's things about how do you start a talk. Well, there's ways to start a talk. I do a stage play for 65 minutes, and there's an opening that we do every single time. But it doesn't have to be the same opening every time. And the ultimate thing when you start a talk is to get in communication with the audience. So it's often I will come out in front of a seminar room. I won't even say what we're going to talk about today, except the topic of like, hey, I'm here to talk about marketing, or I'm here to talk about how to speak from the stage. What would you like to know today about speaking from the stage or leading seminars? And then all of a sudden, hands go up and I'm in communication with the audience. And now we've developed a communication so it's easier to communicate. Some people will get up on a stage for an entire 65 minutes and not even know that they're having communication with somebody. And when you are communicating, you realize somebody's received your communication and they give it back. Guess what? You're relaxed. Because it's not just you there. You're actually having communication and you're creating an effect on the person over there and they're receiving the communication. And so now all of a sudden there's this dynamic that's happening in the room versus a person up on stage that's doing their thing. It can also be called playing with the audience, playing against the audience and what's happening. You also learn this as a speaker. If you start to get laughs, if you're a scripted speaker and you start to get laughs, you stop. You receive the communication back, which is the laugh. You receive it back. And, I've learned this a lot because there's multiple kinds of speakers. You can be a scripted speaker, or you can be a speaker who likes to speak and talk off basic bullet points. So as I was about to do this video with you, it doesn't take me long to create content. I'm like, what are the 3 things I want to share with the audience today? You, right? And so I just put down 1, 2, 3, and now I talk. So I got bullet points of what I'm going to say. In my stage play, I know word for word exactly what I'm going to say at every given moment. But what makes it spontaneous is you never know how the communication is going to land with the audience that night. So how do you create content that's fresh all the time? You do content and you do your talk, even if it's the same talk, you do it in a new moment of time every time you do it. So the same script is a different experience because the audience is different and they're going to laugh at a different thing, or they're going to cry at a different thing, or they're going to maybe tune out at a different thing, and you're going to have to turn your energy up, or you're going to have to do something that impinges upon them at the right time. So this is the beauty of stage talking, is that you have to take a risk to get in communication with your audience. And if you don't take a risk by communicating with them and receiving back, then you're not doing a talk. You're not giving a communication. And then the final thing in speaking is there has to be a message in anything, right? In anything that you're doing, there's like, what's the message you want to send? Okay. And so when you're going to go tell a story, people are like, well, my story doesn't relate at all to my life. And I'm like, no, it's impossible, right? Like sometimes people will say, let me rephrase that. They want to deliver a story and they're like, well, I want to tell a story for my business, but my story for my life doesn't relate to my business. I'm like, that's impossible. Like you created your business. So obviously some part of your life, which is your story, is part of that business. So what you're missing is tying in the thread and finding the thread from your life story and how that communicates into a message or a lesson to the audience. Now, in a great story, people will take away their own lessons, right? But if you think about what you want to say at the end or what you want to say to tie it in at the end, there's a talk that I give when I'm selling from the stage, okay? One of the things that I do well as a speaker is I do selling from the stage. And so when I get up on stage, I sell large packages. I've sold everything as high as $200,000 from the stage, $100,000, and normally I sell $35,000 and $55,000 packages from the stage. So I'm up on stage. I'm doing the pitch. I make many calls to action, and that's a whole nother lesson on how to sell from the stage, which is extremely valuable. You should learn it, and you can learn it in my future trainings. But the main thing is when I'm selling, I will drop out of the sale. And people will think, wow, the sale's over. And I'll just go right into a story. And what I'll do is in that moment, towards the end of my pitch, I'll go into a very personal story. And I talk about a story, and I'm not going to tell it to you today, but my grandparents. And when my grandmother passed away at her funeral, and I got elected to give the send-off speech. And so I tell this whole story. It's an amazing story. Come to one of my seminars one day. And I get to the end of that story, and people are like, what an amazing story, but how does this apply to the pitch that he's making from stage and the product that I'm going to buy? And I tied in a message at the end. And I said, my grandparents used to have this sign when you walked into their beach house. And it was in the back room right next to the bar, which is kind of funny, right? And it used to say, it's a good life. And at the end of my talk, I look at the audience and I say, if you're on a path and your trajectory is it's going to be a good life, or it's going to be maybe an average life, and you want extraordinary, now is your opportunity to take action and get extraordinary. Because I believe that the next generation owes it to the previous generation to be even better for what they passed on and what they gave us. So now is your last chance to be extraordinary and to go for it if you feel like you're not taking the necessary actions to do it. So this is a last chance offer for my program. And somebody always pops up, and multiple people pop up with the last chance offer. And so what's happening there is I can just tell a story, but I can tell a story and I can tell the audience what that message is and it means to me and what I think is important for them to take away. And then they will take away that central message. And so that's what I mean about, like, when you're telling the story, what's the purpose of it? Now, the purpose can simply be to just entertain. But what's the message you want to send to the audience and communicate so they're following the thread all the way through and they're so engaged and you're staying on the path of that message to lead them right to the finish line? They're like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? They're following the thread the whole way through. What is that thread? What is that message you want to send and you want them to end up with? All right. So in closing, quick recap of the three things is: one, tell stories. What's your pit moment? Search for the answers. And by the way, the search is like, search for the answers. Oh, didn't get it. Search for the answers. Oh, didn't get it. Search for the answers. Oh, didn't get it. And finally, is it going to be the break? Is he going to get the answer this time? Breakthrough. Yes. Okay. So that's storytelling. And then take a risk. Be uncomfortable. You constantly have to confront. Years later, after 2 decades of public speaking, I still know when the offer's coming up, I have to confront the audience. And I have fun with it and I love it, but it's a confront. And so you have to confront people. You have to take risks. You have to try new things, and you can't be afraid to look foolish. You just can't be afraid to look foolish. If you ever have a foolish moment, you'll recover from it. Trust me, you're not going to die. Okay. And you may break into sweats on the stage like I did, but you're not going to die. Okay. And then finally, what's the message? My one-man show is called Good Enough. And so I know what the message of this play is and why I created it. So you should come see it by the way. And notice how I'm always like pitching and selling. And it's really a thing because I want somebody to experience this show that I know has a huge impact. I want you to come to a seminar and learn the art of presenting and speaking and selling just because I love it. 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 And I want to share and give that to somebody else. And I also believe that's what selling is. That's what offering something up is. It's an offer of help and sharing. So when we get to that training and that module at some point in the future with my other stuff, you're going to dig that. So I hope this serves you. And, give a great message, tell a great story, and take some risks. And I'll see you on the other side, my friend. And the other side, no matter how tough the journey is, you will make it out the other side. The audience will sometimes feel like they're shooting you with 55 bullets, It happened to me when I made a sale one time and nobody said yes. And there was 55 people in the audience. It's like, you're getting shot with 55 freaking machine guns at once. But I still lived and I still rebounded. So go for it, have fun, help some people, and share your message with the world. Hope this serves you, and I'll see you on the other side.